今天是6月20号中午1点多啊，来你们现场看到是3月5日是红装的啊，请看着了啊，大家你们看着啊，是视频上啊，这个视频你照着拍着啊，大家没有事千万不要出面待在家里面啊，注意安全。
In just one night, the entire village disappeared under the raging water. Bridges collapsed, houses were swept away, and rocks and soil from the mountains rumbled down like giant monsters, swallowing everything. The camera captured chilling moments, the echoing cries for help, the roofs being swept away, the smallness of people before the monstrous power of nature. This was no longer a normal flood. It was annihilation, a terrifying warning. Are you ready to see the whole shocking truth? At precisely 4:10 p.m. on January 1st, 2024, the earth beneath Japan's Noto Peninsula convulsed with a force so sudden and merciless that time itself seemed to fracture. The quake, registering at 7.6 on the Richter scale, struck like a ghostly hammer from the depths of the earth, its epicenter lurking 10 kilometers underground, as if the very underworld had stirred to unleash its fury. For a fleeting second, silence held. Then the ground roared with a demonic growl, the kind of sound that chills the marrow of human bones. The picturesque landscape of Ishikawa Prefecture, so serene a heartbeat earlier, twisted into a stage of horror. Buildings shook violently, as if possessed by unseen spirits. Glass shattered into spectral shards, and rooftops heaved before collapsing in showers of dust. In that instant, Japan was thrust into a nightmare it could neither predict nor prevent. Eyewitnesses spoke of the sky darkening, though the sun still hung above. It was as if a shadow had swept across the nation, a phantom hand dimming the world in mourning. The quake's tremors reverberated like the tolling of a death bell, each wave slamming against the fragile structures that humans had so confidently erected upon the shifting crust of the earth. Floors buckled, staircases collapsed, and in some houses walls seemed to exhale their last breath before tumbling into heaps of rubble. Mothers clutched children, their screams drowned by the grinding symphony of earth and stone. In that cacophony, the ordinary rhythms of life, conversations, footsteps, laughter, were obliterated, replaced by chaos so absolute it bordered on the supernatural. The power of the quake was not merely physical, it was psychological, ghostly, an unseen terror that left survivors trembling long after the ground ceased its immediate shaking. People reported the sensation of being watched, as though something ancient and malevolent had awakened beneath the soil, its presence pressing in from all sides. It was more than an earthquake. It was an unveiling of nature's cruelty, an unmasking of the fragile illusion of human control. In seconds, the line between stability and collapse, between life and death, was erased. Survivors later described how the tremors felt endless, stretching time into eternity, seconds becoming hours in the mind, each jolt a reminder that the end could come at any moment. In Wajima and across Ishikawa, cameras captured the violent rattling of city streets, frames quivering as though reality itself was trembling. The visual evidence became more than documentation. It became testimony to a haunting. Shaking lampposts appeared like spectral figures swaying. Windows rattled like chains in a haunted corridor, and asphalt cracked open in jagged black wounds. The quake was not merely a geological event. It was a theatrical act of dread, staged by the planet itself, with every tremor a chilling verse in an epic poem of destruction. As the first wave of terror subsided, silence returned, but it was not a peaceful silence. It was the silence of graves, of cities holding their breath, of a nation stunned by the violence of the unseen forces beneath them. Japan, a land long accustomed to tremors, felt the chilling weight of déjà vu, an echo of past disasters whispering through the shaking soil. That shattering moment became etched in memory, not as the beginning of a new year, but as the arrival of an uninvited spectre, reminding all who live through it that the ground they walk upon is never truly theirs. It belongs to the restless earth, and the earth, when it decides to awaken, shows no mercy. When the first convulsions of the earth subsided, Japan was left trembling in a silence more terrifying than the quake itself. A silence broken not by relief, but by the moans of collapsing structures, the hiss of ruptured gas lines, and the crackle of flames igniting. Ishikawa Prefecture's Wajima city became the center of a ghostly spectacle, where entire neighborhoods seemed to crumble in slow motion, as though haunted by invisible hands pulling them apart. Houses that had stood for decades, once proud symbols of stability, fell like dominoes into heaps of debris, their wooden beams jutting out like broken bones. The earth had not only shaken the ground but had rattled the very soul of Japan. From the rubble, fires erupted, staining the sky with a hellish glow. In Wajima, flames devoured row after row of homes, turning what survived the quake into ash and smoke. The fire spread with the hunger of a living creature, fueled by ruptured pipes and fallen electric wires, its orange tongues reaching into the blackened sky like demonic apparitions. The city that only hours before welcomed the first day of the new year was now an inferno, where smoke hung over the streets like a funeral shroud. The air became thick with a suffocating stench, burnt timber, melted plastic, and the faint, ghostly scent of panic itself. Residents staggered through the smoke, their eyes wide and unfocused, as though waking from a nightmare they could not escape. The once reliable veins of the nation, its highways, bullet trains, and power grids were paralyzed. The iconic Shinkansen bullet train, a symbol of Japanese precision and modernity, stood motionless on its tracks, transformed into a prison of steel for nearly 1,400 passengers. Trapped in silence, they endured more than 11 hours of immobilization, their journey turned into a ghostly limbo. Outside, roads cracked and twisted, leaving vehicles stranded as though abandoned in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Highways closed in succession, bridges buckled, and in neighborhoods where water pipes burst, streets became rivers of despair. Then came the darkness. Power lines collapsed, plunging more than 32,500 homes into blackness. Cities that should have been aglow with the hopeful lights of a new year instead resembled graveyards under the shadow of night. In the silence of powerless neighborhoods, fear grew. Families lit candles not as celebration but as wards against the darkness, their flickering flames fragile shields against despair. Mobile phone networks faltered, cutting the lifeline of communication. For many, the silence of their devices became unbearable, a ghostly void where once there had been voices of loved ones, now replaced by nothingness. Even inside stores and supermarkets, scenes grew surreal. Shelves stood eerily untouched in some places, as though waiting for ghosts to return, while in others, aisles overflowed with panicked crowds grabbing supplies in a frenzy that mirrored the quake's chaos. In these cramped aisles, the illusion of order shattered. Humanity's fragility was laid bare, desperation etched into every frantic motion. The destruction was not uniform, it was cruelly selective. One home collapsed into rubble while its neighbor remained standing, a reminder of the randomness of fate. Survivors emerged, covered in dust, faces pale, their eyes haunted by the echo of what they had seen. For them, the quake was no longer an event. It was a curse, a reminder that life could be stripped away in seconds. And as fires raged, power lines fell, and silence spread through disconnected phones, the people of Ishikawa realized with chilling clarity. The quake had ended, but the nightmare had only just begun. Even as dust still hung in the air from collapsing houses and fires devoured streets, another terror began to stir. Not from the earth this time, but from the sea. Barely 10 minutes after the quake, the wail of tsunami sirens shattered the uneasy silence. Their piercing cries rolled through towns and villages like a chorus of banshees, each note a chilling reminder that the nightmare was far from over. Along the rugged coastline of Ishikawa, fishermen abandoned their boats. Families scrambled inland, and temples emptied as bells clanged against the rising tide of panic. The Japan Meteorological Agency's warning spread across television and radio, but in many places, electricity was gone, leaving people to rely only on instinct and the terrifying cry of alarms. At 4:21 p.m., the sea itself seemed to awaken as if possessed. A 1.2-meter tsunami rose and hurled itself upon Wajima's shores, its white-crested waves shimmering like ghostly apparitions under the dimming sky. To some, it seemed the ocean had turned into a monster, its rolling body a giant serpent striking against the coast, its foamy mouth swallowing cars, debris, and fragments of lives already fractured by the quake. The sound of the water was deafening, a roar that mingled with the cries of the displaced, drowning all sense of hope beneath its weight. Streets that had survived the quake's shaking became canals of black water, dragging away whatever dared to resist. The waves carried more than physical destruction. They carried the memories of March 2011, the haunting spectre of Fukushima's tsunami. For the elderly, the sirens reopened wounds carved more than a decade earlier. For the young, it was the realization that legends whispered by their parents were real, alive, and merciless. Japan was haunted not only by the present, but by the ghost of its own history, a recurring nightmare that returned with chilling familiarity. The ocean was no longer a provider of life, of fish and trade. It was a phantom executioner, waiting at the edge of the nation with cold patience. Evacuations turned into scenes of desperation. Families poured into higher ground, clutching children, blankets, and what little they could grab before the next wave arrived. Stadiums and community centers swelled with displaced residents, their walls echoing with murmurs of fear, prayers, and the sobs of those who had lost everything. The arrival of the tsunami transformed the quake from a tragedy into a multi-headed beast. Earth and water now conspired together, leaving no safe refuge. The psychological weight was immense. Survivors spoke of the sea as if it were alive, whispering in the darkness, its crashing waves sounding like footsteps of an invisible giant pacing the shoreline. In the ghostly glow of emergency lights, the water shimmered like liquid glass, reflecting not hope but dread. And even as the first wave receded, warnings persisted. More